Hey, everybody, this is Paul with the Curators podcast, and I'm really excited to have my friend Linda Steele here with us today. Before we get started, I want to present a little 30-second clip here that Linda shared with me, and I think we're all going to enjoy listening to this here, especially if you're a baby boomer like me. Okay, here we go.
Integrity, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Immunity Assessment Enterprise. Our ongoing mission to explore strange new scientific truths, to seek out lies and discover new answers, to boldly go where no CDC, FDA, or WHO scientist has gone before.
Yeah, and that says a lot, doesn't it, Linda?
Scientific integrity. It's too bad that
Okay.
it's a frontier that's not
Yeah, yeah. So
anymore.
uh, I want to welcome you properly, Linda. Linda Steele is the founder and chief scientist of the Immunocare Foundation. Her background includes specialties in medicinal chemistry. She is a natural product chemist, biosensor designer, and immunologist. And most recently, before going independent, worked in a CAR T cancer research lab. I don't know what CAR T is, Linda. Can you explain that, please?
Yeah, I'll tell you a name you should look up is Emily Whitehead. Emily Whitehead, she's like the poster child for when CAR T works. And what they did was they took her immune cells out, and she had a B cell leukemia. And so they altered her T cells to have an antibody receptor to attack her B cells. And then they gave her back her own immune cells. They attacked the cancer, and she's been cancer free for somewhere in the 10 to 15-year range.
I've heard that name, Emily Whitehead. I'm glad you brought it up. I'm going to go back and look into that. Uh, and this is an area that you've specialized in for a long time, and we've gotten to know each other on the grassroots campaign trail for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And one of the things that I admired about you right away, it became clear that you're a person who does not compromise her principles, and we like that. We like that very much. And
I had a better career and more money if I didn't.
uh, there you go. Right. But we do not sell our souls to anyone here. And so and there's so much we can talk about on that one topic alone. But let me start by asking you a question. And for those who may not know, I've brought this topic up before in the context of healthcare. My question is, what percentage of the entire spectrum of the human body, everything there is to know, do we really understand?
About 0.2%.
0.2%. I was going to say
No,
2%. And I've said 2% before, which I thought you were going to say a higher number than that, but I'm glad to hear you say that because
it's like how much of the universe or how much of God do we know? It's like it's so complex. There's so
there
much.
you go. There you go. And yet, it seems to me that the way this has evolved into a real business, over $4 trillion a year in healthcare spending, there seems to be a lot of hubris governing the industry that suggests, it's more as if they think they know 92% of all there is to know about the human body. And when I say they, I don't mean many of the doctors on the front lines who are dealing with this with their patients on a day-to-day basis. I'm talking about at the institutional levels, the hallowed halls of big pharma, their relationships with the governing bodies, the institutions like the NIH and the CDC and the HHS and the FDA, right? We can talk a little bit about those things as well. But I I was really taken by your article that was written for the Falconer that was entitled Diplomas of Deprivation. And that's something I wanted to explore with you because that goes into what appears to be this kind of like a bait and switch between the cost of education and the rise in endowment funds. Can you spend a moment or two introducing us to that topic?
Yeah, I mean, I've experienced a lot of it. Like when I was doing biosensor research at a university, there were these three young grad students. Now, when you go into a university in any kind of science or engineering, they make you sign your brain off. You sign this non-disclosure kind of thing, which, I mean, you're there to learn so you could use your education, not so you can have your brain owned by somebody else. That's not really cool. And these guys were
Keep
down in the
going.
basement, and they grew algae and converted it to fuel. So they're the biofuel guys. And then they sent this down to Texas to an aeronautical research place, and they flew a passenger-sized jet on this algae fuel that they grew in the basement. All of a sudden, their advisor is now getting to work with the basketball team, and they're not getting to publish the work. And Phillips 66, and the money's going, and it's like, you don't get that. Your NSF money goes into your tax dollars, goes into Washington, D.C. And then it went to that university. The university owned the research. They owned those students' brain. They owned the idea. And then they could sell it off. It doesn't go back to the people being allowed to use that anything. So if the NIH, if I get money from the NIH, it doesn't return to the taxpayers the benefit. It can be sold off and squished or exploited. And the university makes a lot of money that way, a lot of money.
But they're not passing it along to the students in the form of lower tuition.
Oh no. No.
Because that chart we were showing before, I'm going to bring it back up here. It just shows the fact that tuition has gone up by 1,200% since 1980 compared to only about 230% inflation. That is insane.
Yeah.
And the problem there is that that represents a lower and lower return on investment, does it not, for
Yeah.
a college education?
Especially if they don't allow these new novel industries to develop, exist. Like
Mhm.
the Emily Whitehead with the CAR T. It's like I go into a CAR T lab, I'm never, ever, ever given access to a patient's immune cells and their cancer cells. It's like behind the curtain, it's a big fake. They're saying we're a CAR T lab, and it's not like we don't do any of that research, but we're not allowed to actually try to get an individual patients cured by using their own immune cells, which the doctors and the oncologists, they want that. The patients want that. The researchers want that. And what I do is called upstream, and what a doctor and your oncologist is downstream. Between us is the corruption of the government. That is the problem.
It sounds like a major contributor to this growing wealth gap. You know,
Yep, it is.
it sounds a lot like what goes on between Wall Street and Main Street. You know, and there's then you have the incestuous relationship with the monetary system and the government and the money printing and the Fed, and where does all that money end up? And then they own basically whatever the research leads to
Absolutely.
and then how do the pharmaceutical companies come into play? Do they work with the universities? Are they strange bedfellows there? Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, when you see these ads during your basketball game that say Phillips 66 or Mobile or whatever, there's those. They have certain bed partners. Like one of the guys I worked with was selling, basically taking my research, and he was going to sell it to Abbott because he always
Hmm.
worked with it. So it was like, which I don't think Abbott even exists at all anymore. So there are certain ones, and whether Abbott would want to use it or to squish it because it's going to, cost them revenue. It
Yeah.
it it doesn't. It's not my choice. It's not the people's choice who probably paid for some of that. As a matter of fact, that research was done for a different company that wasn't Abbott, but he was going behind their back and trying to sell it because then he would get patent money.
Patent money.
Patent.
Let's talk about incentive and motive, because there's a lot of that going on here,
Mm-hmm.
and royalties too, right,
Mm-hmm.
Linda?
Yep.
What is going on there? Because it's starting to look like, we used to have a situation in this country where 6% of the population had a chronic disease. Okay, when I was young, 6%, that was the number. That number today is 60%. Um, so we're spending more and more money. We're developing, people are getting rich off of patents, off of royalties, off of these incestuous relationships, and yet the American public is getting sicker and sicker. So the takeaway, this is not a model of wellness as much as it is a model of sickness. That's my statement. Do you agree with that?
Oh yeah. And okay, so my grandmother was born in 1899. She didn't see a car until she was 18. We're talking 100 years, and look what we're exposed to. We evolved for a long time, and all of a sudden, there's all these things that our bodies don't know how to deal with, and that is just steadily increased. Yeah, and what they don't allow, like what I can do in a lab compared to what a doctor has access to, are completely different. For me, we need to have cellular level healthcare. It needs to be infiltrated and be part of our healthcare system. Now, cellular level healthcare is like dentists are for teeth. This doesn't exist because this is creating an entire workforce to try to cure people and find out what's wrong with them, to cure their cancer, to prevent Parkinson's and MS. It's releasing scientists from all these bondages and shackles and not having the support to actually cure people. It's not our fault and it's not their fault. It's between us is the corruption. That is what
Right.
is it, is this massive amount of corruption.
Sure. And that's kind of what I think I touched on that before, because we know, for example, doctors who signed the Great Barrington Declaration. We know the doctors of the FLCCC, Frontline COVID Critical Care Alliance. I know doctors who stood up in the face of the mantra of the, these agencies that told them they had to toe the line on certain things, otherwise they would, suffer the consequences. And boy, did they ever, right? A lot of doctors who truly put their patients first throughout the pandemic were tarnished. They had their licenses revoked. They were threatened. They went through all kinds of torment, but unrelentingly, they stood firm in their beliefs. Right or wrong, they were asking the questions based upon putting the patient first, not profit first. That was my takeaway on that.
Absolutely. And I mean, how does this American Medical Association tell them to do these things without giving them tools? Like for cancer, you're going to give someone something toxic to kill off their cells. They don't have screening. I can easily grow cancer cells in the lab, and I can throw every single chemo that's ever been in on the market, whether it's an old one that's off patent or a patent one, and I can, come up with, this takes out 90%, this takes out 7%, this takes out 3%. So if you combine them, we can take it, this is the what we should do for the patient. For the individual patient, we should use these chemos. That's pretty simple, but it's not done. The American Medical Association tells the doctors they have to use current treatment option. And lo and behold, current treatment option is the latest patented chemo. And, and that gives too much power to the American Medical Association over doctors and over their patients.
There again, sounds like the profit motive is taking hold.
Right.
And so is healthcare generally becoming less of a right and more of a privilege Is that the direction our system is moving into, do you think, or is that too strong a statement?
Um, no, yeah, I would agree with it actually. And you'll also notice nonprofit, you know, nonprofit is a huge, nonprofit cancer, nonprofit pediatric hospital. And again, it's a twisted thing where uh, not only are they charging people and insurance companies, they're also asking for donations. And then they're not paying taxes. All these healthcare industries that are nonprofit isn't because they have a bigger heart, which is corrupting a system that, there are a lot of excellent nonprofits, but these corrupt ones are, there's no cap. There is a cap on the like CEO making money, but it's so huge. Like when I was working, in the CAR T cancer research lab, I was also doing a study for the pediatric hospital, and they were raising funds for research. And then they gave the CEO $5 million. I'm like, I'm in a lab with broken equipment, not even 222 extra dollars, and that one man gets $5 million, which means
Right.
there are people that got 3 million, there are people that got 1 million. I think MD Anderson a few years ago, I added up I found something online, and over 85 people at MD Anderson making more than $250,000.
Hmm.
And then you could go to the PubMed and look at their research, and they have HeLa studies. Now, HeLa is a cervical cancer cell that was harvested from Henrietta Lacks. She died in 1951. MD Anderson has so many cancer patients, they move them around with trains and trams. Why are they studying the cancer cells of a woman that died over 7 decades ago? That there's no way you're going to cure Henrietta Lacks. That it was brilliant. What we learned from her cells in the 50s and 60s was fabulous. But if you go to PubMed and you look at the timeline of HeLa cell research, you'll see this huge explosion this century. And that is the control of the money. Like if I want to keep my lab open, if I want to do cancer research, the only way I can get money from them, the NIH or other places, is if I promise to do HeLa cell research. So it's like, if you say she's like Michael Jordan was to basketball, then you're looking at Michael Jordan out there in his 90s with his walker, winning like a dozen NBA titles a day. That's when you look at the timeline for the HeLa cell research. It's like 50s and 60s, which was huge, 70s, 80s, and then 2000s. It's just this huge peak, 100,000 publications. And it behind the curtain, it's like, why would you study someone that died decades ago when you have all these patients wanting to be cured? Like immunity assessment. There is no way to design a vaccine without being able to determine if you can't design brakes for a vehicle without having a test system. Like it's not possible. You're going to have to test your brakes before you put them in a vehicle or a train. So you have to have a system to do immunity assessment. You have to get a set of cells that from people, the immune cells, that you have to determine, do they have immunity already or not? And if they already have immunity, they get kicked out of the study. And then you only have the cells that don't have immunity. And then you inoculate them with your vaccine for measles or mumps or whatever you need a patent on. And then you produce your vaccination. But immunity assessment is not allowed. Like you don't go with your child and give them the blood and say, what does my child already have immunity to? We're not bubble boy. We have immunity. We're born with immunity. It's very unique for everybody. But you cannot ask it's not the pharmaceuticals' fault. They're not going to spend millions on clinical trials for immunity assessment to lose billions or hundreds of billions in revenue. They're not going to do a clinical trial to sell off their immunity assessment screens.
But we can't be,
The
we
FDA
can't,
should.
yeah, somebody's got to do it because we ought not to be dispensing vaccines to people, especially young people that don't need it.
Don't need them. No, we should not. So that really tells you the problem in DC and the corruption level. Why would an FDA not provide that to us?
Right.
It's something we've known how to do for many decades, many decades. It should be available. A parent in a real world of real science, of integrity, you would take your child in and your doctor would screen them and then sit down and go, well, chicken pox, everything's great, all immunity except for chicken pox and polio. It's a conversation you can have. And the next thing is in vitro inoculation, not whole body in the arm, but at the cellular level, and then giving the child their memory B cells that work. Just like Emily Whitehead got her own cells to kill off her cancer. We can take a heart from some other individual and put it in a stranger. We've known how to do that for decades, but giving a person their own immune cells back, how is that not a thing? How is that not done? And it is massive corruption.
I've said many times that this is largely a political problem with a political solution. And we know the two major parties, Linda, have been part of this corruption. They have
Absolutely.
their palms out. They're taking donations to stay in power, so that those who are greasing their palms can continue to ring their registers. That's a general statement. That's a broad statement, but you can see it. We have evidence of that, where they're not really putting the patient first. And so the political solution, I believe, to be Bobby Kennedy and, importantly, Nicole Shanahan too, who is well on her way to unraveling all of this with Bobby. And this is the prime example of what they refer to as corporate capture in the system,
Mhm.
the medical industrial complex. And Nicole talks about how somebody approached her from an investment standpoint, a business opportunity in the multi-trillion-dollar autism market, you know, as opposed to somebody approaching her to say, how do we cure autism? How do we eliminate autism? How do we reverse this staggering trend where it used to be 1 in 10,000 people diagnosed with autism, and now it's 1 in 44, I believe. I believe that's the number.
It's pretty high. I
Yeah,
remember before I went to college, I worked as a para with handicapped kids, special needs kids, and they were like, "This boy here has autism," and I was like, "What's autism?" I'm like,
right.
I'm like 20, and I have no clue what it is. It was like it wasn't. I didn't know because it was. Now it's like I could list off probably somewhere between half a dozen or 10 pretty close friends that have kids with autism. It,
Right. And
it
it's not just autism, right?
no,
It's all it's diabetes, pre-diabetes, ADD, ADHD, even a rise in cancer. I'm seeing in my neighborhood, and then all kinds of other things too. I could go. There's a long list, right?
right.
Myocarditis, all of that. But I look around me. I'm in New Jersey, Linda, and I look around me and I'm seeing a lot of business establishments closing down, like the retail level stores and all of that. And what's going up in their place? These urgent care centers, children's hospitals, diagnostic centers, radiology, all of these like sort of opportunistic, they're really thriving businesses off of these chronic diseases that have been exploding in this era. And certainly we know, and I'm sure you know, Bobby Kennedy wants to get to the bottom of the chronic disease like day one.
I am a fixer, a solver. If you want my gift, it would be to come up with experiments and way to fix things. So the Immunocare Foundation and also immunity assessment are some of my fixes. So the Immunocare Foundation, it's been evolving for a while now. Um, whether it's cancer or coming up with screening for immunity assessment, I want to franchise these. I want communities or individuals to be able to buy these and to own these and to run these. And one of my big things for experiments is detox. Like, like how do we detox people? Like, and these are research centers that then end up with protocols. Like, we're doing research and we find out that, okay, now we've got 30% of testicular cancer patients respond to this. Then you work up the clinical trial and you can sell that. But
Detox from what, Linda?
everything. So the detox is, do I really have to know what it is to detox it? Like, do I actually have to know where it came from and what it is? So cytochrome P450s, maybe that we don't have or more. High vitamin C for chelations. I met a guy in Nebraska who does barometric pressure, because that could possibly push out things that are like the ethyl mercury, if that's stuck in the brain. Possibly adding some like things that I might come up with chelation and cytochrome P450s, and someone else has a different chelation agent, and then we put them under a barometric pressure. Can we work up ways to eliminate toxins from the body? So if I have toxins in my body and we can find out that there are enzymes that can break that down that I don't have, we may have to pull blood, detox it, and put it back in. That is another piece of research. But we have to
I've heard about that. Yeah.
be allowed to open this up, communicate between scientists.
Yes.
And then you're going to have a whole nother issue. Like, if we're having neurons blocked, if autism is blocking of neurons, and we figure out what's blocking them and we remove those from the body, now you're going to have a bombardment of like, they won't know what to do. Like, they haven't been able to, even some don't even know how to swallow. They can't even control their swallowing, so they drool. Like, if all of a sudden you allow them full act, like their neurons are working full on, that's going to be an explosion of they won't know what to do with that. You're going to have to figure out how to ease them into a world where they have exposure to all these things that they've never had exposure to before, because they were blocked, the neurons were blocked. So these are entire new industries we should be promoting and working towards. And I want to promote them as franchise and at the community level, at not so much worrying about who your neighbor's working there, right? Where your cryo frozen your immune cells over there.
Removing the sort of capture element, right? The corporate capture.
Right, absolutely. I would really like to see Mr. Kennedy take this advice from me to put in research centers, not instead of the universities, they've just lost their integrity. Put in research centers that are locally owned at a franchise level, communicating with other franchise, improving research, whether we're cleaning water, solar and wind energy, really removing toxins from soil. And I think to do a lot of this, we're going to have to eliminate these agencies we have now, because like what happened with JFK, he takes duals out of the CIA, but the entity was still there, and he was still controlling them, and then JFK is assassinated. I think you're going to have to, if the FDA doesn't exist because it's been divided into 3 entities, and so everybody going into the 3 entities have to go in and get a job, which means they have to go through I also want to put together the scientific integrity guardians to actually filter through, like, if you really don't know how to do this, or you don't have loyalty to the American people or morals, then you can't have this job. I think the EPA should be divided into water, fresh water, salt water, air, Yeah.
Well, one of the things Bobby is talking about is, making it like any government official who does not come clean and tell the truth to the American people based on their official title and position in the government will be fired immediately. He's made that statement. And to your point about the universities having lost their way, we can see here how just over the last five years, this is only 2022 numbers, but $65 billion in gains. And you actually presented me this information, but I've seen it verified elsewhere. Uh, these are gains that I think have turned these universities into more of a status symbol
Hmm.
than any useful research facility for the public good, right?
Right. And if you have franchise local research centers, you're training people to have jobs that they can be proud of and make money at, not 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 taking their money for tuition and then not providing them with a source of income afterwards.
You
Paying
know what
off
I
student loans is not a solution.
you know what I love here, Linda, and I'm hearing it from you and I'm hearing it from other people, and we just encounter this at the Curators all the time. It's a beautiful thing, and it really is emblematic of the candidacy of Bobby Kennedy and this People First movement, is that the answers come from the ground up. They come from the grassroots. They come
Right.
from the local communities. We had a podcast with Jim Gale from Florida recently, where he has a plot of land in St. Cloud, Florida, and that plot of land was entirely filled with sand just a couple of years ago, and he converted it in an all natural way to what he calls a food forest, an abundant food forest, fruits, vegetables. And he actually gave us a little tour of the property on camera there last week. And it's an amazing thing. It really is, because he's not worried about, you talked about the soil. He doesn't have to worry about the soil getting contaminated, and what that might do to the rivers and the marine life, and all of those knock-on effects. I mean, we've done some segments. We had Kelly Ryerson on, who's the glyphosate girl, and she told us about a lot about what is happening with Roundup, and some of the political challenges there, the legal issues, and that's a known carcinogen. I wrote an article called "Who Are the Immune Ones Really?"
Yeah.
You
That,
know,
yeah,
we're
that's great.
trying to spur the immune response in people, but it's really the ones that it's the companies themselves who are really immune, because they got the lawmakers to pass a law that says you cannot be sued for any reason, no matter how much damage your vaccine may cause. And that that puts them in. There's only one other group that applies to, and that's the Army Corps of Engineers. So they're exempt from any liability, right? And now, lo and behold, you go from 3 or 4 vaccines at that period of time in the late 80s. Now we have this CDC schedule of 73 doses, I believe the number is up to, of 17 different vaccines, multiple doses of most vaccines,
Make them
as
more,
it
you get more money.
there's they never have any liability, right? And they now own the airwaves with these
Got to buy five.
advertisement, so they control the narrative, and not just with vaccines, but with the whole industry for all kinds of drugs. But if there is an existing drug that can be used, repurposed to treat the virus that has gotten into the population, and it works, the repurposing of an existing drug is effective, and we know it's safe because it's been through the rigorous testing, then there's the law says you cannot develop a vaccine. So any would-be treatments for COVID that could have been applied from the existing base of drugs were all sort of put off to the side because of the opportunity for these companies to make enormous amounts of money off of vaccine development. That's my theory. What do you
Okay.
think of it?
So there were top three things that anyone in my industry knows are in place for a pandemic. And we had two presidents. President Trump did not do these, and then President Biden did not do these. Don't vote for either of them. Number one is release of data. So when you go into a doctor's office and they hand you the clipboard and update for any new medications or new issues, that goes into a worldwide database. Now, I remember when I was studying medchem, and it was in the 90s, and so the Y2K was coming up, and they were concerned that they were going to lose this worldwide database because they said not if a pandemic shows up or when a pandemic shows up. We need the
Right.
data. We need to know what medications, stop this from being severe. That data was never, ever, ever released. Now they did release, you can go to Worldometer COVID and you could still see, even for tiny little countries, the current death rate, the fear stuff. That was released, but not HIV patients on RNA antivirals. How often do they go into the ICU compared to people that aren't on RNA antivirals, or people like rapamycin that limit a cytokine storm? Do they go into ICU as often? That was never ever released. So that was number one. Number two is bioterrorism units. Now, how the entire propaganda, how people did not ask for our military. This was one of the scariest things of the entire pandemic, is the loss of our military to protect us. We lost more than 1 million people, and they did not call up bioterrorism. They'd leave us bioterrorized for 3 years without calling up bioterrorism units. And the Marines have a CBRIF, which is Chemical Biological Initial Response Force, not called up. And the Army has one that's called the U.S. Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Disease, AMRID. Now, Dustin Hoffman, because he played a scientist and went looking for a monkey like 20 some years ago.
The movie was Outbreak. I remember it.
Yeah, he can suit up. Dustin Hoffman, the actor, can suit up and take a petri dish in and get somebody to cough in it. We're not talking high IQ stuff, but somehow the whole propaganda and everything, people were not asking, hey, where is our military response for bioterrorism? And this happened worldwide, not just within our borders. So we didn't get release of data. We didn't get our bioterrorism units called up. And then they never did the immunity assessment or in vitro inoculation. They also locked all the doors of the labs at the universities. Like, I was not an essential. If I worked at a gas station, I'd be an essential employee. But being able to design and work with immunity during a pandemic, everybody's locked out. Like, you cannot go in a lab unless it's owned by Pfizer or somebody. So our money is just being shoveled to these big entities. But the universities and professors and individuals that might know how to shut this down are not allowed near labs for weeks. I mean, it was unbelievable that they got away with this, and people just watched their TVs in fear, and nobody said anything. Now, Mr. Kennedy, he says, give me a sword and ground to stand on, and I will take your country back. And for me, the sword that I can give him is my knowledge. I know this. I know immunology. I know vaccine studies. My sword is my knowledge. And the ground to stand on for me is trying to get the average person, without going through years of all these. It's no fun to sit through that many hours of lectures. I just happened to be a nerd and loved it. But I can get the average person to comprehend really quite a bit of stuff. Like, demand that your child has immunity assessment before a vaccination. If you get the average person to demand that, to know what it is and demand it, that has a lot of power. So the ground to stand on is getting more people to comprehend what we're capable of in the 21st century of science.
There is a movement in Washington to keep Biden from signing on to that WHO agreement. I don't know what he's going to do, but I don't like. I'm not. I don't know enough to say for sure, Linda, but I
You're
don't like it.
talking about one individual or one set of individuals having control over economic world power.
Hmm.
Just
Exactly.
because they say so, you have to shut down your business. We already saw that in our country. Like our businesses were shut down because they decided to shut them down without releasing data, without giving us bioterrorism units, without doing science of the 21st century. They did that to us. And and now to say, hey, we should just give it all to one person, one head of the World Health Organization to make this call. If you have like Immunocare type cellular level healthcare centers in your neighborhood and you've got your immune cells stored there, then you get somebody to cough in the petri dish, or you get that virus in there and you expose cells and you allow the cells to respond to it, and then you give people their immunity. Now, I can't 100% say that will work because I'm not allowed to do that research. That research is not allowed. Something that's
Right.
not allowed, which is it's something you just don't see, is there you hear about blood clotting with the vaccine. That's one of the things you hear that and I have seen in my research I did when I was working with a natural product and using whole blood. I had a 4-hour incubation time. And when I came back to the lab after 4 hours, this one sample had gone solid. So this individual responded and their blood went solid. Now, it didn't do platelet clotting like the black flat that you see when you get a clot. It was like tapioca, and it was kind of orangey colored, like fatty. And later we found out T cells can be stimulated to produce plaque. So my question is, does that happen with is there a percentage of people that produce this plaque formation from their T cells exposure to these vaccines? Now, the experiment for this is to run a serial dilution of different concentrations of your vaccine and put it in whole blood and then check it in a few hours. We're not talking high IQ, we're not talking difficult, but you've never seen that experiment.
Mm,
I
right.
mean, you can even get people that had, I know of a friend in Scotland who lost a leg. I don't know how he's alive. His blood went to clotting really fast and they got to shut down. But I'd like to take his blood in the lab and do a serial dilution with a vaccine and see what occurs. Because that's science. That's answering a question. And so them just not being held responsible, I don't know that they could have gone through producing that vaccine without running that sample and seeing that. I would be shocked if they never saw that.
So, a couple of stats I've heard and have read up on as well, that the United States, and somebody could argue that these numbers can always be a little manipulated, or other countries might not reveal the exactly correct numbers. There were some questions there, but the general consensus is that the United States suffered 16% or more of the worldwide COVID deaths, even though we only have 4.5% of the world's population. And even since COVID, putting that aside, the average lifespan of an American has declined precipitously since 2019. Something like close to 4 years on it. That's a stunning number when you think about it.
Mhm.
That the average lifespan, especially for people who are lower or middle income people, people who maybe are geared toward more of the fast food chain type of restaurant, that kind of thing, or the middle of the supermarket store shelves. Uh, the, those people are dying significantly sooner in a country that spends twice as much as any other country per capita on healthcare. So
Mhm.
something's not right. I mean, that there's a serious disconnect there, Linda. How could we be spending twice as much per capita on healthcare as any other nation, and yet we're the country with by far the worst health trends in the world?
Corporate capture. I'd say corporate capture is our number one issue.
So that would mean, if that's true, and whether it's the pharma companies, the food companies, the chemical companies, we don't really. I'm sure there's some combination there that kind of hits the bullseye, but uh, we could argue that that is the ultimate. I said before, the face of tyranny. I would say that the more accurate term is fascism, because you're talking about the merger of state and corporate power,
Mm-hmm.
and that is something, when you have them working together and throwing the financial, physical, emotional health of the average American under a bus, which we can see is happening. And that's happening while they're enriching their coffers, and their stock prices are high, and their stock options are coming in, and it's like being at the track and hitting every race, hitting the long shot on every
Right.
race, and so and this somehow has become the norm, and we hold these corporate executives in such high esteem, like they're brilliant and they're heroes, as opposed to they're just kind of, you know, operators in this system of privilege. And,
A
you
lot.
know,
So
yeah.
like you can go to the pub, which is what we call the pub med. If
Hmm.
people go to
Yeah.
the pub med to the NIH and they put in Fauci and they put in HIV and flu vaccine, there's going to be a couple papers that come up, and one of them actually says objective immunity assessment, like 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 immunity assessments, like tens of thousands of publications on. And Fauci knows how to do this, and Fauci is published in this, and so are all these other people. To turn an immunity assessment for COVID was as simple as taking the antibody tests that they did on plasma. Now, plasma has no cells. They spin all the cells out. They have plasma, which is like wanting to know what kind of fish you have, and you take the water and you leave all the fish out and you check the shit. Like it doesn't make any sense. It's a big waste of money. So to change that for immunity assessment for COVID, you would take two blood samples, and one you add the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein, and one you leave alone. And then a few hours later, then you do an antibody test on the two samples. Now, if someone didn't have any antibody in their blood, and then they produced it upon exposure to SARS-CoV-2, they have immunity. That is like, that's a few hours of a test. A lot of the work we do at a cellular level is like cooking. We have protocols. It's we're not building spaceships and keeping, rocketing up to the moon. It's so much simpler than that. It's like, and so I want the average person to be like, if you get the average person to know what it is and demand it, that is our power. That is where our power lies. If you get the average parent to never take a vaccine for their child without demanding immunity assessment, and I am talking about having to reach like millions of people to get them to say these things. Now, we came up the promo you did at the first is the immunityassessment.com. And what that is I had an app made, again, experimental person that I am. And the app is it allows you to put in your story, your pandemic story. Whether you got it and you got it at like a level 3 or level 8 was going into the ICU. Whether you took remdesivir or ivermectin, whether you got a vaccine, you didn't get a vaccine, so it's that data bank that they did not release, but it's we the people putting it together and entering. It's going to take the thing that blocks me is I'm not a very good marketing person. I don't know how to get like a million people to go and put their data in. But the great thing about what I did was when you whether you fill it out or not, you yourself can make graphs. You can decide, I want to know what happened to the 15 to 25-year-old males. How many of them were pre-pandemic on a heart medicine, and how many are post-pandemic on a heart medicine? How many HIV positives on RNA antivirals went into the ICU compared to ones that aren't on RNA antivirals? How many people, you can just sit there and make graph after graph after graph after all these questions that you filled out. And then you get a QR code with this. Now, the secondary thing we want to get is labs, and these don't need to be sterile labs with incubators to do our immunity assessment protocol. So basically, we're asking people to donate enough to get this cost covered, to get their blood assessed, to do that two blood samples, and then do the SARS-CoV-2 in one, and then have the lab decide your antibody level pre and post SARS-CoV-2 protein. So then you connect a physical experimental blood assay with all the data you collected. The only thing that I'm limiting on this is like I don't have the people to fill it in, to fill out the form, and then we need the labs to do it. But it will show people exactly what was available, what should have been done, and what science
And
based.
it could have been done, it should have been done, and they chose
Absolutely.
not to. They made a calculated choice not to do it. This is not like, oh, we forgot. No, no, no.
No, no, no.
They they made a calculated choice. And why would they do that? Why would they make a choice not to do those studies, Linda? What's the motive behind that?
Well, you do have a combination of stuff, but for the people like Fauci, who are probably very intelligent and very knowing, well, you also have Jeffrey Dahmers. I mean, you have sick, power hungry people that I will never comprehend, that they just will do evil things.
Yeah.
We've seen it in history again and again. Like how much the British Empire took over, just decided they needed to be in control of little countries everywhere. Why did they need to be in India or controlling people? So you see it again and again. You also the pharmaceutical and the tyrannical puppeteers, I call them. They also control the scientific publications. And one thing that happens, like I will be like the only person working on an experiment that I had this experiment that took me more than 20 hours in a 30-hour time frame. I would start in the morning and I would finish like at 4 or 5 the next afternoon. Like, because
Wow.
nobody was there to help me, and right. But then my boss wants to publish it with like 30 names on it. I'm like, no, no, because I know exactly what this means. Those 29 people are saying they know how to do this. They're professionals in this. So when people are like, this scientist has 100 and some or 200 publications, there's name dumping is constantly done. A lot of those people in Washington, D.C., in the FDA, in the EPA, they've been name dumped. They've been picked as great puppets. And they don't want to admit that they really don't know what their publications say they know.
So
And
this gets back to, yeah, and that's the point. I think we spoke about it early on, when they walk around like they know 92% of all there is to know, when they really only know 2%. And the one thing that is lacking in the entire industry, Linda, to me, from where I sit,
mm-hmm.
observing, researching, going down the rabbit hole on some things, the one key element that's missing is humility. And that is the most important quality that anyone in the medical profession can have. The single most important, more than knowledge, more than effort, more than commitment, is humility. The ability to say, I don't know. I'm going to approach this with a healthy skepticism, with an open mind, right? There's there's a whole world of information out there that not only have I yet to discover, but it won't even be discovered in my lifetime, you know, and and that's okay. We can do a lot of really good things with that element of humility. It's just like in my profession. I'm on Wall Street. I don't walk around like, I don't go around telling everybody where the market's going tomorrow because I don't know, right? It doesn't matter how much knowledge or experience I have. I have a lot. I'm 65. I've been in this business for 40 years. But there's a whole world of complexity out there that I can only scratch the surface on understanding, you know, and and then, the rest is up to forces beyond my control. So yes, less hubris, more humility. That's my mantra to the profession, and not just medicals, other professions too. Yeah, yeah,
Especially, well, all the big ones like the petroleum industry. I mean, again, and energy. We are beyond these things. You have to allow the scientists freedom, and you have to support us, and you have to get the corruption and the puppets out, because there's no way that the greatest wind energy is three fan blades going around on this ginormous thing. It's everything in every living system has high surface area. You have miles of surface area in your lungs, like that you walk around with miles, you know, and they're saying that three fan blades is the greatest way to get energy going with wind. No, it's not. It is not. That's just
mm,
you need everybody having these little leafy things collecting energy outside your house and getting everybody off the grid. That is possible, and we could take it so much beyond that too. But that takes all the power and it puts it into the people's hand,
right, right.
not and out of the energy companies and the petroleum industry and the pharmacies and even and the prison systems. Why are so many people in prison for smoking dope? Or it's like when all these states sell it now.
Well, you talk about recovery centers, which you were touching on before. There's models that are being used in other countries where these recovery centers can be used to help people with addiction, with alcoholism. Prisons can use it to reduce recidivism significantly, where what they do is they create these self-sustaining mini societies. Again, a grassroots effort, right? It's from the bottom up, and
Not
they learn.
somebody making money by enslaving prison population
And
to
that's a thing. You wouldn't
it
you
is a
wouldn't you wouldn't think so, but it's a thing. It's very real. The profit motive, and and there's something particularly sinister about that. Rather than reform people, we want to take advantage of the fact that they're looked down upon by many people in society, and let's kick them while they're down. Let's really make money off of their plight. And I don't know, there's something about that that really rubs me the wrong way, where the opportunity to turn things around is very real, and you can teach these people how to, uh, you know, and I'm not going to sit here and profess to be an expert on the prison reform system. I'm not, but I know some things about it, Linda. And if you can uh, help people to feel better about themselves and their contribution to society, there's that deep instinct in every one of us that can be tapped into, right? So,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. That's why, like the franchise system of energy production, or healthcare, or farms that are franchise owned by the community.
Hmm.
You're part of it. Like if you work there, whether you came from the prison or you're retired, or whatever your situation, you are an important piece of that operation, and you should feel
And
good about that.
yeah, and you learn skills, right? You learn how to landscape, you learn woodworking, you learn HVAC,
You learn how to grow
and
cells.
what's that?
You learn how to grow cells.
Learn how to grow cells. Well, the healthcare system needs to change at the cellular level. I think
Absolutely.
that's, you know,
And
that's uh, that's
cellular
one.
care. It has
Yeah, and
to break
and
out.
Bobby's book on, he's the one to do it. He and Nicole they're like the perfect remedy for what ails this nation on so many levels, right? This whole concept of corporate capture. Who's who's who has a better opportunity to unravel corporate capture than Bobby Kennedy? No one. Who has a track record of fighting on behalf of the average person in America over the last 40 years? No one. And on both counts, Linda, it's not even close. So why is this even a thing? Why is it even a discussion?
Propaganda.
Bobby is, it's propaganda, of course. And earlier today, there was a speech that Bobby and Amaryllis made about Bobby's chances in this election. We can touch on this, that, in the head-to-head, he's doing extremely well because more and more people are finding out who he really is. They can't, the propaganda is no longer working. In other words, the Biden people are spending more and more money on billions, on campaigning to try to suppress Bobby. And it's like the more they throw at it, the better it is for Bobby. It's backfiring on them, as it should,
Yeah, yeah.
because people are seeing through it. People are fed up.
And
You
tell you, I'm going to challenge. I want to put a challenge out there to debate any scientist of the cellular level with immunology, vaccine, virology that support Biden or support Trump. If anybody like hammers me or anything, let's do a debate. Maybe we could ask Paul Labasco to narrate this for us. But I challenge debate.
I'd
I
be honored to, and I'd be happy to co-host it with somebody from the other side, so we can be Switzerland here, and I'm sure that that would be an interesting and lively discussion. But because I know that your interest is with the patient, and Bobby too. His book about Anthony Fauci. The irony is he gets called all these names: whack, lunatic, you know, conspiracist, of course, and they do that. That's the tactic of the real conspiracists, by the way.
right, right.
They accuse the truth teller, like Bobby, as being the conspirator. That's a classic tactic. They've been doing it to him for years. But if you read his book on Fauci, everything, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of detailed resources, government studies, everything is cited. The man knows 1,000 times more about the science than those who criticize him. Think
Right.
about that, folks.
Oh,
Yeah,
I dealt with that myself. It's like sometimes people are like, "You need to get a vaccine," and I'm like, "Do you even know what a virus is? Do you know what I ask if they knew what messenger RNA is or knew about uracil and they would get upset with me. I was like, "Don't get upset with me. I'm actually a scientist. I actually could design one of these." Like, and you are telling me because you watch TV that I should do something. Propaganda told you and you believe it blindly.
and let me be clear, folks. This is not a question of being pro-vax or anti-vax. Okay. I know I'm speaking for Bobby Kennedy now because I've heard him say it so many times. He is not anti-vax. He is pro-safe vax,
And
right?
science, 21st century science, immunity is
Science,
in the
science, right, right,
that is where we're at in this decade. And
right.
that is not allowed because it doesn't make money. It
And
makes,
science, Linda, is not scientists who are engaged in a profiteering scheme. That's not science. Science is not religion. Science is not choosing to see what you want to see and ignoring that which is inconvenient. That's not science either, right? Science is always asking questions and developing more information over time, and so it's always a work in progress. Otherwise, the world would still be flat.
right, right. And when people ask me, can you prove that? And it's like, well, give me the money to support my lab and I will collect the data and I believe we'll prove it. And hitting
Right.
walls, doing things wrong or having to adjust an assessment or something, that's again science. That's not a
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
you could ask me how to detox people, and it's like, well, whatever I think day one is going to be different on the next year, the next month. Every day, everything we ask and look for an answer changes the next step. But you have to take away the blocks. You have to allow us to use science of integrity and let us do our work across the board.
And do so with, this idea that we can all be wrong. We can all make mistakes. And if the data supports a theory other contrary to what I had hypothesized, then I have to change my opinion, and I will, right?
That is what the immunityassessment.com, the app we want, the fact that we're giving you the raw data to work with. Like it only works when once it's set free and everybody can fill it out, right? Once we need to get some more money and we get set out. But you can decide how to do that. You can decide what questions you ask. You can graph what you ask. You can run the statistical analysis on what you ask. You can put your graph on your Instagram feed or your Facebook. You know,
Wow.
it
Is
is.
that live? You touched on it before. Is that live now?
No, we need a little more money, but one of the biggest things, if you put it out there and you get 200 people to work with it, it's going to get shut down. It's one of those things you kind of have to release to know it's going to release and go viral. Like set up. I don't even know how to do it. That's where I fail. I can come up with an experiment.
Okay.
It's absolutely brilliant.
All you angel investors out there, I know there's some of you listening to this. Take heed. Take heed. And let me point everyone. I want to point everyone to. I'm just going to put this in the notes here too. This is an article that Linda wrote that really I knew you and liked you and admired you before this, but when I saw this article and read it, this was to me a very special. Maybe somebody could, if they want to pause the video and take a snapshot of that. It's right on. You can go to people4kennedy.com and read the Falconer, where we have something like 55 articles. I think we're up to 60 now by the end of this week. And Linda's written a couple of them, and this one really rocks the world of anyone who just thinks that everything is hunky-dory. We're here to tell you that
Maybe
there are
a pink mafia working inside, working for the pink mafia.
wow, yeah. So,
You're
all
not
right,
allowed to cure cancer. I'll tell you that for sure.
okay, we're going to wrap it up. Is there anything you'd like to say in conclusion? Where can people find you, or any concluding thoughts?
Oh,
Up
I
to
don't
you.
know that I want them finding me. Hide out.
You can't hide for long, Linda.
Yeah, immunityassessment.com. The guy that wrote all that app and all that work. I mean, it's mostly there, ready to go. And so I would really like it if people knew how to send that out to get it like marketed and sent out to the world. I think that would be a huge knowledge builder for people to release data, scientific data that they themselves put the information in.
Nothing I like more than to spend time with someone who seeks to do good in the world like you do. That's really awesome.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Right back at you.
Okay. All right.
Love you, babe.
Take care. Love you.